Today on Words and Numbers, the CDC has a warning.
Justice and forgiveness.
DNA testing dogs.
And fact-checking the president.
And, as a bonus, what is a woman anyway? All this and more coming up on Words and Numbers.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
So what's new and exciting in your world this weekend?
We've talked a number of times about the Words and Numbers backstage group on Facebook.
Yeah, after your recent announcement, we got a big spike in
a bunch
people
of people
showing
joining.
up.
And I wanted to, on the one hand, I want to address a topic that came up there. On the other, I want to give people who aren't familiar with it an example of the quality of conversation that's going on there. And this is a post by one of our listeners. I'm not going to call them out largely because I didn't ask them to begin with. Having said that, I'm going to call out another one later. But let me start with this. This was in response to our episode a couple of times ago when you were talking about Erica Kirk and the fact that she forgave the guy who killed Charlie. And one of our listeners says, okay, hang on. There's a difference between forgiveness and justice. Justice requires punishment regardless of forgiveness, though the matter of degree is important. The degree of the punishment should be determined by the principles of justice, not forgiveness. Now, I responded to that. But wait, if the person who has been wronged forgives, who's left to demand justice?
All the rest of us.
Well, but okay, so this is the quality of the conversation. This person comes back, right, and says the wrong is not just to the person, but to all of society. In a larger society, there's an interest in seeing that the act is dealt with from society's perspective. Such a perspective includes seeing that some moral balance is restored and the person is prevented from committing more harm. None of this precludes forgiveness. And all of that this is a great conversation, but it leaves me with this nagging question. Have we not just taken, with that argument, have we not taken a big step down the path that ultimately leads to victimless crimes?
I don't think so, although I understand why you could I understand how you could make that argument reasonably given the circumstances, right? So I don't think it's a crazy thought. I would back up and say that there's a certain class of crimes that are so horrific that they must be punished. And I'll give you a quick example from the world of philosophy. Immanuel Kant, somebody who exactly nobody really wants to read because it's a chore. But Kant said, if society were to disband, its last act before disbanding should be to execute all the murderers. And there's a point there. There's a very reasonable point there, right? Because we're dealing with certain crimes, and I'm thinking of murder, and I'm thinking of sexual assault, and especially child sexual assault, right, which has incredibly high levels of recidivism. Some things are so bad that you can't turn away from them. You have to take them head on.
Okay, so I have to ask you, are you saying that you can't turn away from it because of the moral status of the crime? Or are you saying we can't turn away from it because this is a crime that this person may commit again? So in some preemptive sense, we want to prevent that from happening.
My answer to that would be clearly both.
Okay, because in the second case, I can agree with you. And I would say, look, regardless of whether this person who was wronged has forgiven, the fact is we've got a person here who has demonstrated the capacity to commit a crime and to commit it possibly again. It's in society's direct interest to put this person away. And that is specifically to prevent future victims. But let me take a hypothetical, and it might be hard to come up with an actual example, but the hypothetical is you've got someone who has committed a crime that rises to that very high moral level that you're describing, and yet there is no chance here of recidivism. For whatever reason, this person will never commit this crime again. And
here, let me paint a picture for you that makes exactly this point, right?
Okay.
A man gets incredibly intoxicated, let's say 4 times the legal limit and drives his car through a farmer's market, killing 14 people. Little did we know, there's a pill that you can take that will make it so you can never be drunk again. And he's just going to take that pill from now on. Do you let him off the hook?
Okay, well, two things. First, let's suppose that he kills only one person, and that person forgives him.
Okay.
And he's going to have to...
Not that person specifically.
Right, yeah, but, sure, yeah. The people who have been wronged forgive him. And for the reasons you described, this is not a crime that he would ever commit again. I don't see the argument for society stepping in and doing something. And I hear the words of society has this larger calling to deal with this from a societal perspective, but it really bothers me because that is exactly the argument that you make when you make things victimless crimes. That, for example, drug possession isn't harming anybody except possibly the person who possesses them, and yet we make it a crime because we claim that society is somehow harmed.
Yeah, but society is in fact harmed by murderers and rapists and thieves.
Right, but if the harm has been done, it's not going to happen again, and the person's been forgiven.
What about the educative effect on future murderers, rapists, and thieves?
Okay, but are we then misusing the justice system as a teaching tool?
Look, there's only a couple of ways, right, to view the justice system. One is a teaching tool, one is a reform tool, and one is a punishment tool. And reform seems not to work that well, but does under certain limited circumstances. Punishment works literally every time because you punish people for what they did. And the educative effect, I think, is an open question, right?
Yeah,
how many people will say, I'm not going to kill that person because I know when Johnny killed that person, he went to prison for the rest of his life.
Oh, okay, but when you talk about using the law to educate, and I've heard actually a lot of people on both the left and the right make that argument.
Can I change my word?
Yeah.
Can I change my word? Because educate doesn't seem right. Inform.
Sure.
Threaten. Right. It's somewhere in the middle of it. These words form a cloud, right? And the one I'm talking about is kind of in the middle of that cloud.
I've heard I was in a debate actually with someone an economist, who made that argument in defense of the minimum wage. He said, yes, I'll grant you all of the unemployment effects you're talking about, the negative things, but the fact is, when we impose a minimum wage, we elevate in people's minds that indeed labor has value.
But labor does have value, right?
Sure, but to me, that's an abuse of the law. That's not what the law is for.
Well, let me ask you this. What's the negative externality of locking up murderers?
The negative externality? Putting aside recidivism.
Yeah, you seem to be telling me that there's a problem locking up murderers. What is it?
No, I'm saying if you have someone who is not going to murder again, and the person who was wronged has forgiven, in my mind, society has no call to be saying anything here.
Yeah, I think we have found yet another one of those things that you and I are just going to disagree on all the way down. But I will say this. Maybe people don't realize it yet, but if you're watching on YouTube and you're at the very end of the episode and you see that there's like 9 more minutes and you don't know what the hell that is, that's one of us telling a story. And I've got one today that exactly hits what you're talking about here.
All right. We'll leave the conversation for the end then.
Yeah, and for our time on Backstage, where I suspect emotions will be whipped up over this, I want to talk about a surge, and I'm going to lose half our audience just with the first 3 letters that come out of my mouth. The CDC, okay, everybody who's still here can continue listening, warns of a surge in dangerous, highly antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And man, are we going to catch everybody in this particular net. It's like a 450%, 460% surge from 2019 to 23. Holy hell. As someone who, as you might remember, Ant, damn near died from an infection, people, I don't know if we ever announced it per se, but I was septic some years ago and rushed to the hospital, and bad things happened. And lots of antibiotics flowed into the Harrigan body for a long time.
And if you want to see it, it's actually recorded for posterity. James and I were in the middle of an interview on something like CNBC. I don't know what it was.
No, it was C-SPAN. That's right.
C-SPAN.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the camera went on me, and they immediately cut the feed. And 2 seconds
James
later, I was lying on the floor.
Way.
And then the next thing I know, I was in the hospital. But anyway, we've got a 460% spike in this, and we used to say we'll put the article in the show notes, and we don't say that anymore because we don't have show notes. More on that next time Ant opens his mouth. No, I mean that in the literal sense.
I know.
I have more on that next time you open your mouth. But here's where it gets really weird. Because we all know that overprescription of antibiotics causes this sort of thing to happen, right? The viruses, or the bacteria become, I've tipped my hand there a little bit. The bacteria become resistant to the antibiotic. And, Americans, myself among them, complain a lot that you can't just go down to the Walmart and pick up some antibiotics. You can do this in almost every other country I've ever been to. And yet when things like this pop up, you say, well, maybe nobody should be able to get antibiotics all that quickly, because look what happens. But, Ant, do you still remember the years I told you we got the 460% spike?
You said 2013 to 2024, is that right?
You're exactly right. It was 2019 to 23.
19.
So there you go. And what happened during those years? COVID.
That was COVID.
And at the beginning of COVID, doctors were prescribing antibiotics like they were going out of style because they didn't know what we were dealing with. Or they didn't know it was a virus. And there is no virus that responds to any antibiotic. So keep your conspiracies to yourselves. And yet, the conspiracy theorists among us would not be without a point here, because it was a byproduct of COVID that yielded this outcome. And this is one of those unintended consequences you and I talk about, and this one's a particularly thorny and horrible unintended consequence.
It's
I found it interesting on almost every level.
We can't, at the time, we didn't talk that much about COVID because you couldn't. People are getting canceled left and right for saying all sorts of things. I made a video on the number of people who were killed by COVID versus killed by the fact that they had less access to hospitals. And I went over with a fine-tooth comb everything I said in that video before it was published. And even then, I was nervous about it.
Well, I remember those times, and honestly, you and I don't talk about healthcare much. We talk about science in the beginning of the episode quite a bit because it's fascinating. But we tend not to talk about healthcare that much because we don't understand it all that well. Right? We're loath to make blanket statements about these things.
But I will tell you, I was in the hospital ostensibly for COVID early on. This was May of 2020. And there was a whole sequence of events that led up to this. And they put me in the hospital, and they immediately say COVID. And they take the tests, and the tests don't come back. They're coming back negative, but they're still saying COVID. And they put me in the COVID ward, and they start giving me whatever the drugs were that they gave for COVID. And it was an interesting thing because it was in this hospital, they had jury-rigged, which everybody was doing at the time, these blowers, one in the window that was all taped up with plastic bags that sucked air out of the room and blew it to the outside. And then other ones in the doors, the tubes and so forth that lets the air back in. And if you were to design a room that would give you COVID, it would be this. Put somebody in this room on a floor with a bunch of people who had COVID. But the long and short of it is, I ended up with quadruple pneumonia for a reason that had nothing to do with COVID.
What the hell is quadruple pneumonia?
That's the 4 lobes of the lungs. I'm saying words now.
Because I'm sitting here thinking you only have 2 lungs, you know.
Yeah, there's something about lobes. But here's the thing. I'm there and I'm getting worse and worse. And they've got me on the oxygen. They can't get the numbers up despite the fact it's like 100% oxygen. You know, it's blowing my hair off. It's like, but finally, they listened to my wife when she said, but it's not because of COVID. It's because of this other thing that was going on. When they finally listened to her and they said, oh, this is just pneumonia. And they treated it as pneumonia. Fixed overnight.
Yeah, I remember that. And you were in rough shape. Maybe.
Yeah, because I had untreated pneumonia. Everybody was saying COVID.
Maybe that's a story you can tell after an episode too, because it's actually quite hilarious. But I remember, Aunt, I got very sick a couple of 3 months thereafter, and I had literally every symptom of COVID, and I could barely breathe, and it was really rough. And it got so bad that nobody would come into my office, and I wasn't allowed out of it. They would leave.
I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
Remember the family, my wife would leave meals at the door on a tray.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't even come in. And it never occurred to me to go to the hospital because nobody was getting well going to the hospital. So, fuck it, I stayed home. It's going to end how it's going to end, and that's just how it's going to be. Anyway, Aunt, this, of course, brings us to the foolishness of the week. And this, my friend, is a very special week because 2 things are so stupid that I couldn't pick between them. The first,
are we getting both of them?
Yes, we are. The first is, and I believe I said I was going to cover this in a previous episode and then just promptly forgot. So here we are. Here in my home state of Arizona, a state that I have come, as you know, to love quite deeply. There's a young woman named Jacqueline Taylor. She bought a condo down in Phoenix, or Scottsdale, which is the very nice version of it. To me, that entire area is simply Phoenix, but there are multiple towns down there. People don't realize this. Phoenix is the 4th biggest city in the United States. There's like 5 million people lurking around there in the middle of the desert. Peggy Hill on King of the Hill referred to it as a testament to man's hubris, which I think is exactly the right description. But poor Jacqueline Taylor's got herself a little tiny dog, the way that young women do, the kind that you could probably carry in an oversized purse. So it's not a dog as much as it's a pet rat. But it's her pet rat, and she loves it. But she's in a condo, and condo means homeowners association. And apparently the HOA there was taking issue with dogs pooping in the common areas. Now, Jacqueline says, A, dogs are not pooping in the common areas, and B, my dog never does because I take him over to this other place to do his business. So, one way or the next, seems no big deal to her. Until the HOA decided, and here's where it gets really quite wonderful, and anybody out there who, like me, lives under the auspices of an HOA will immediately understand the busybully nature of this bullshit that they're pulling. They declared that every single dog in the condos had to be DNA tested so that when one of them had the temerity to poop in the common area, they could DNA test the poop and match poop to culprit.
How much does a DNA test cost?
$150 mandatory.
Wow.
And you can only imagine that if they match the illicit poop to your pet, there's going to be more fees after that.
Wow. That's funny.
This is why you got to ask around about an HOA before you move in.
Yeah, I ran across a quote. I wish I'd had it because it was beautifully written. I believe it was Harlan. Was it Harlan Ellison? You would know the quote. I don't think it was Harlan Ellison, but it was, it was the one about The one about government doesn't make, in effect, busy bullies. Rather, they're attracted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, now I've completely botched the whole thing. I should have looked it up.
We'll edit this nonsense right out of the episode. Anyway, I myself, Ant, as you know, live in an HOA, and one day they decided to send me an unsigned letter, so I couldn't respond, demanding I paint my house. And then when I painted my house, $10,000, I had to take down all the lighting fixtures, and it turns out they were all shot. They had to be replaced outside. $135, $145 each. Go ahead, ask how many there were.
Outside lights? Good Lord. 10? 15?
29.
Ooh.
So the local
wow.
HOA board ended up, by the time you're all done with everything, it ended up costing me like $15,000 because some jackass walked by my house and went, "Wouldn't it be great if he painted that?"
But look, in a microcosm, that's the problem we have so often in this country, of somebody walking by a problem and saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be good if that problem didn't exist," without understanding any of the downstream ramifications.
And people point out, somewhat rightfully so, that I voluntarily joined the HOA when I bought the house. Now, that's actually correct. I did join. But it wasn't exactly voluntary. If I wanted this house, I had to join. And it turns out if I wanted any other nice house in this entire city, it was coming with an HOA.
Yeah, it's interesting how things that in theory would not be coercion start to appear like that under certain circumstances.
Sure felt like it to me when I had to paint the damn house and spend $15,000. But anyway,
don't leave the topic. I've got the quote. It's Frank Herbert. Frank Herbert says, "Power attracts pathological personalities. It's not that power corrupts, but that it is magnetic to the corruptible."
Well, that seems to be the case with HOA boards.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about running for my own HOA board just so I could be a colossal pain in the ass to everybody who wants to do anything. I want to join the board and just say no every time a vote comes up, no matter what.
That's how Ron Paul got elected.
Well, it's worth a thought. I did think about running for Congress on exactly that platform, that no matter what, I'm voting no.
Get Words and Numbers on Civil.com and on Civil's TV and mobile apps. Regular episodes are free. Sign up for an annual membership to support our show and for access to member-exclusive content.
I did say, Ant, that there were two foolishnesses this week. You'll never guess. Let's just
Go ahead.
We're going to England, and we rarely do this. We rarely talk about England, but, England has fallen apart. You've seen it lately, right, with people getting arrested for speech and things like that. But apparently, the city of Bristol have solved all of their other problems because the city council has decided that they have to, from henceforth, refer to women as, quote, people with ovaries, unquote.
All right, now this is England, so I have to ask, to whom does this apply? Is it just
people with ovaries?
No. Who the directive? Is it people in the government or anybody who lives there?
The city of Bristol, and I'm sure that I'm sure there will be tragic overreach
people
with this.
So what about the other people? Is it people without ovaries?
That's left to the imagination given the news stories I've read. And then there's a further problem. They don't want to use the word maternity anymore, referring to all of it as paternity, not seeing that there's an obvious problem with their own logic in their own context doing that. But no, Ant, we've gotten to the point where nobody is willing to say men and women anymore. And you know what? I am. There are men and there are women, and let's just be realistic about these things. For the love of God, people with ovaries? You've got to be kidding me.
But this is a beautiful example of what we talk about often, the importance of first principles. The first principle is it's the thing you hold dear from which logically other things follow. And if you don't operate from a basis of first principle, you very quickly end up, as the city of Bristol is, with holding two opinions that are mutually contradictory, because neither one of them is based in some principle.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell's wrong with these people, and I honestly don't care. They need to stop. Apparently, the backlash against the city council in Bristol was severe and unmistakable. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the English have lost their collective minds. They have not. But the Bristol City Council surely has, and I suspect there will be a different composition of said council sometime after whatever they have for elections there.
Oh my God, I love it. I refer everyone back to Frank Herbert's quote, "It is not power that corrupts, but it is magnetic to the corruptible."
Yeah, and there we are, the week of two foolishnesses. Or is it three?
No, it's two. This week, what prompts our topic this week are a couple things, but first amongst them is, again, on our Facebook group, Words and Numbers Backstage, one of our listeners, Tom Wisnowski, who has listened to all, at the time of his writing, 457 episodes, which I've lost track of how many episodes we have now that we're coming out twice a week.
It's about that many. He's listened to all of them.
He's listened to all of the episodes, thoroughly enjoys it, but he calls us to task, not for criticizing the president, but for quoting headlines. And I think he's got a point here. And we call other people to task when we write op-eds and they only read the headlines.
Well, two things. That's right. We do. I do. I will read you out loud the headline of various things I'm looking at as a snapshot of what's to follow. But the second thing is more important, and it's where Tom is maybe more right than even he thinks. Because you and I know too well that we've written some 300 editorials, and we have named exactly none of them. The titles are always written by an editor.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And when I was an editor, I wrote titles over and over and over again, even though I wanted desperately to respect the wishes of the authors who submitted the work to me for publication. Mm-hmm. Authors write lousy titles. Authors of great articles write lousy titles. And you need something punchy that will get people's attention, which is by definition maybe a slant on the truth of the story. So Tom's not without a point here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do my best to give what I think is an honest take of the thing. I'm sure I get it wrong sometimes. I don't think I get it wrong a lot, but sometimes I'm sure I do.
Yeah, one of the discussions that came up had to do with the executive order and flag burning. And I actually had a back and forth, a nice conversation with a couple of people on Backstage about that, where I actually found the executive order and put it there. And there were still, even though the words were right there in front of us, there was still a reasonable disagreement about what they meant. And none of us being lawyers, we couldn't say anything other than, some people are interpreting it one way, some people interpreting it another.
Yeah, one of the things that came up today was that, and I don't know if this was Tom, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but there were a number of criticisms in the same thread. And I think some of them were more valid than others, but they all had something to offer. Mm-hmm. And I appreciated seeing them, if you could believe that. I responded to a couple. But one of the criticisms was that we should use more conservative news outlets than we do. And I disagree with that, primarily because I don't go out of my way to find a partisan outlet for news. I go out of my way to find the news itself, right? So if we're going to criticize something, let's just pull one out of the air that Donald Trump said. I want to see the film of him saying it, because people abuse the quotes so badly that I don't know when I'm looking at a more partisan news source on either the left or the right if they're being honest with the source material at all. So I go out of my way to find when I can, and you can't always. And I know for a fact that when we get into numbers, you go to the source material. We're not reading through an ideologically biased lens. That doesn't mean that our biases don't appear. It just means that at most you've got one level of bias, ours.
Right.
And I freely admit that I am as biased as anybody else. But I think that by admitting it, I can work on it. And when I try real hard to work on it, I think I can give unbiased opinion.
Everybody's biased. Now, some people are blatantly, unapologetically biased. Now, that's a problem. But, for the rest of us that try to get it right, this is where open, respectful civil discourse is so incredibly valuable to us. And we were talking just before we started that we've been doing Words and Numbers for 7 years plus now, and we've never had a guest who's hard left. Not because we don't want one, we actually really, really badly want one to have a good conversation. And we ask, but because people seem to be, at least everyone we've reached out to, is more interested in pushing an agenda than in having a conversation.
Yep, they will not come. The leftists, for whatever their reasons, will not come. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to present their opinion. Why would I do that? I'm going to present what I think is the correct opinion, which I do all the time when right-wingers come on the show. We push back on them when we think they're crazy. But left-wingers won't even come on.
Well, along those lines, one of our listeners sent me a link to President Trump's address to the United Nations.
Can I start with two other things with the UN thing before we get there?
Yeah.
One of them matters and one of them doesn't. But there were two things that happened at the UN. The first, you probably saw it, Trump and his wife, Melania, walked up to the escalator and went to get on it, and it stopped working.
Oh.
And everybody lost their minds. Look what they did to him at the UN. Look what they did to him to embarrass him or make him fall, this kind of crap. And then when he walked out on stage, and this is the one that matters, the teleprompter didn't work.
I saw that, yeah.
Right? And look, if you're going out to speak in front of a large room and you've got certain points you are absolutely going to make, you need something in your hand or on a screen. Right?
Oh, usually both.
Usually both. People have given speeches with their remarks typed up in their hands for hundreds of years, since the typewriter, I dare say. But it turns out that it was White House staffers, apparently, that were responsible for both of these things.
Oh, really? The escalator, too?
So, the escalator, too, yeah. And I only say apparently because the UN did the investigation. But I'm not hearing a whole lot of pushback from the White House saying, that's not true, it was all on you, which you would, I think, if it were otherwise. But remember, when we talk about the speech he gave, that the beginning of it was without assistance of a teleprompter. And then at some point in the middle of a very long speech, he said, oh, and by the way, it's working again. And I want to say something relatively kind, which is probably going to make heads explode, about Donald Trump. He is really good in front of a room. Right? Even if he's saying things I disagree with, he's engaging, he's entertaining, he is fully committed to what he's saying. He's a very good public speaker. And I think that in no small part made him president twice. But anyway.
I got the link to the video, and not only did I watch it, I downloaded the transcript so I could get his exact words and get them right. But our listener sent this with the statement that if you watch this video, which I have, you'll see that he front loads it with lots of economic facts. And The question to us is, how much of this is true? How much isn't? And so I'm just doing some fact checking here. Now, to go back to your original point about data sources, and I don't say this enough, I guess I should. When I quote numbers here on Words and Numbers, they're coming from the sources. So it's either Bureau of Labor Statistics or Bureau of Economic Analysis, or it's the Fed, or whatever it is. It's not USA Today.
Right. Let's take a deep breath. They come from the very government that Donald Trump sits atop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. This isn't some wingnut out there saying, we hate Trump, how can we cook the books to make him seem worse?
Yeah. Now, along those lines, someone can still argue with the numbers, but the hurdle becomes much higher, because if you're going to argue with the numbers, it's not an argument of, well, that number has been misquoted. It's an argument that the literally hundreds of analysts, fact checkers, data collectors have somehow gotten together to produce an incorrect number. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm just saying that that's the hurdle.
That doesn't happen. What does happen, though, and this is something we've talked about a number of times, is that certain things are notoriously difficult to measure.
Right.
And
yes.
How you choose to measure them will have a noticeable effect on the number you get at the end. And the perfect example is unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
Who counts?
Yeah.
And if you're out there saying, well, unemployment is better than it's ever been, is it? Who counts as unemployed right now?
Yeah.
Because a bunch of people.
How is it defined? Yeah.
A bunch of people are no longer applying for work. They're so discouraged. They don't count in that number.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be a problem. Why? Because they're unemployed. Right. And you see the difficulty here. But if they're not looking for work for whatever reason, you can't really count them, because that doesn't get you to the heart of what unemployment is trying to measure.
Yeah. And now that you mention it, James, it reminds me of, we talked some years ago about infant mortality numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that seems to be a very easy thing to measure, right?
Easy.
Because you've got, pregnant
Infants
mother or
and death.
newborn baby and death.
Yep.
And but
these are binary conditions, right?
Right, yeah.
Find out.
But it turns out even that is hard to measure when you are comparing across countries. Because, for example, in some countries, if a child dies all the way up to age 1 or 2, it's counted as an infant mortality. Whereas in the U.S., I believe it's a matter of months. I forget what it is, 3 to 6 months or something. Older than that, it's not an infant mortality. There's also the problem that the better, and you have this in the United States, the better your health care is, the more likely a woman is to come to term with a sickly child.
Yep.
Whereas if the child dies in utero because you have worse health care, that doesn't count as infant mortality.
Right.
But
so
if the child does come to birth and dies, then it does.
And anybody who's dug into this ends up squarely looking at a problem, and that problem is that infant mortality, for whatever the reason, is very high in the United States compared to third world countries. The hell.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, and people point to that and say, see, that's because of your bad health care or whatever it is.
No, it's evidence of very, very good health care, actually. Yeah. And any number of data points have this kind of difficulty woven into the collection.
But nonetheless, let me go to his talk, and I've pulled out a number of the factual things. He says a lot of things that were opinion, and I'm not looking at those one way or the other. I just want to look at the things he said factually. And he starts off by saying, we are rapidly reversing the economic calamity we inherited from the previous administration, including record-setting inflation, inflation like we've never had before. Now,
all right, so I want to be clear. We're starting with the incorrect things that he said, I take it.
Oh, no, this is just in chronological order.
Oh, okay. So we're going to have, I'm guessing, some that are nowhere near the money and some that are on it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I have two points here. We're rapidly reversing the economic calamity we had inherited from the previous administration, inflation like we've never seen before. And on the one hand, he's absolutely right that inflation is coming under control. However, two things worth noting. Inflation started coming under control under the Biden administration. And you can point to that and say, yeah, but inflation became a problem under the Biden administration, which is absolutely correct. But it became a problem as a consequence of all of that COVID spending that occurred in the first Trump administration.
Yeah.
Now,
and help me out here for a minute. The calamitous inflation that we had, and look, we had pretty bad inflation.
It peaked at like 10%, roughly.
10%. What was the inflation back in 79, 80, 81?
It was about the same. In fact, no, it was higher. I think it went to 14,
right.
15%.
Even that can't be right, because I remember being able to get a certificate of deposit for 17%.
Yeah, you're correct. So maybe it went even higher still. But nonetheless, we've seen much worse inflation. But here's my point here. Firstly, it's incorrect to blame all of that inflation on the Biden administration when, in fact, it came about because of things that were going on during the first Trump administration. And secondly, it's kind of incorrect to say that he's got it under control when, in fact, it started coming under control well into the Biden administration. But above and beyond any of that, I wouldn't either blame or praise either one of them for this. This was not a presidential thing. This was, we had COVID, we had to do something. The thing we did, I think the better thing would have been not to have lockdowns, but given that we did have lockdowns, I think the second best was what happened. What happened necessarily gave us the inflation. I don't place blame anywhere here, nor do I, well, if I'm going to place it anywhere, it's going to be on the Fed, but that's another episode.
Yeah, we'll do that some other day. I'm with you, and we were pretty consistent being against the lockdowns.
Yeah.
Pretty consistent. And when they happened, we said, now you're going to have massive government spending, and when you do, it's going to be so massive that it's going to cause spiraling inflation, and we're all going to have real trouble as a result. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay. Once you tell people they're not allowed out of their houses, certain things naturally follow.
And understand here, people are going to come back and say, well, so you're saying we shouldn't have spent all that money. And my response is, no, we should have spent it, given that we were having the lockdowns. It was the second best.
Given that we were having the lockdowns, I'm not sure we spent enough.
Possibly. I mean, we came through COVID much better than any other country did, minus the debt that we incurred.
But a lot of people ended up losing their businesses. Mm-hmm. A lot of people ended up becoming homeless. Right? These were problems that emerged once you tell people you're not allowed to do business. When you're shutting businesses down, people can't make a living. And we didn't give people enough to replace what they lost. Mm. Right? So, there was no good answer. Well, there was a good answer. Don't lock down the economy.
Yeah.
But once that happened, the rest of it just all naturally followed. And I want to take issue with what you said here a little bit. Inflation is not under control.
Oh, more on that in a moment.
Okay. All right. I'll just shut my mouth and let you go.
Next statement. And again, this is just in the order that he said them. Under my leadership, energy costs are down, gasoline prices are down, grocery prices are down, mortgage rates are down, and inflation has been defeated.
What's that phrase I'm looking for, Ant? What is it? Bitch, please.
I just saw one as I'm reading it. I saw one I didn't look at, the grocery prices. I'll pull those up right now. But here's what we do know. So he said energy costs are down. Not really. The price of electricity is up 7% from this time last year. 7%, it's not double digit, which is nice, but it's certainly not down. It's up.
Not insignificant.
Yeah. Now, he's right about gasoline. Gasoline is down year over year. It's only down 1%, but it is down.
It's still down.
Whereas so many other things are going up.
He often says, though, that it's under $3 a gallon, which is, I guess, not fair is fair. We stick with this speech and this speech alone.
Yeah, I think so. Mortgage rates. He said mortgage rates are down. They're actually up 0.2% from this time last year. Inflation has been defeated. Well, consumer prices are up 3%. Now, that's not the 10% we saw at the peak of 2022.
But it's not the Fed. But it's not the Fed's 2% goal either.
Not only is it not the Fed's 2% goal, it's not the 2% average it was prior to COVID.
For decades.
Yeah.
What, so almost 20 years?
Yeah, about that. Give or take, maybe 15. Yeah. But so there I'll say, yeah, I'll give him credit for the statement inflation is quote unquote defeated in that it's no longer 10%, it's now 3%, but it's still 3%, not 2%. And there's no indication it's headed toward 2%.
And 3 is 50% higher than 2.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the pain to use 50% more than the pain of 2. The only thing that's up is the stock market, which just hit a record high. In fact, it hit a record high 48 times in the last short period of time. I don't know what period of time he was talking about, but here's the numbers. S&P 500 is up 16% over the past 12 months.
That's a good return.
Last year, it was up 32%.
That's an even, some might say that's twice as good. Somebody might say that. But nonetheless, 16% is pretty solid.
16% is solid, particularly in light of the tepid economic news. The economy has been growing at a lackluster pace. Inflation or unemployment keeps ticking up. Inflation, we can't get it back down to where it was. So all of that is kind of tepid to bad news, and yet the S&P is up 16% for the year. That's really good.
What about the Dow Jones?
I didn't look at the Dow. And I don't look at the Dow largely because when you look at the Dow, you're really looking at an average of a couple of very large companies.
Yeah, you're
just
really,
go look at those companies.
It's 30 companies, but it's overwhelming. It's overwhelmingly, I think, 5 or 6.
Yeah, right. That's correct. Now, S&P also has a similar problem. The S&P 500, although it's representative of 500 stocks, it's driven largely by a small subset of stocks at the top.
Well, maybe we should be talking about the total market index.
Yeah, and there is one like that, and we could do a whole episode on it. In fact, he's going to talk about the stock market. It hit a record high 48 times recently. That I didn't count, but I would not at all be surprised that he is correct. But the reason he's correct is because the stock market has been rising. So if the stock market's rising, of course you get 48 record highs. If it's higher tomorrow than it is today, that's another record high. It's just going up. The question is, what's the percentage change? That's what matters.
Yeah. Well, look, at 16%, wow, you're going to make a lot of money in a market like that.
Yes, 16% is higher actually than the average. The average over the long term is like 12%.
Yeah, no, it's well higher.
Oh, and I found the number for food prices. He says, is one of his first statements, food prices are down. And for those of you who are interested in how we get the data, I'm on a beautiful site called Fred. It's the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. You can go to Google, just say Fred and whatever it is you're looking for, and a graph comes up. And what I have here is inflation over the past 12 months for food, 2.7%.
Inflation on food is a little lower than general inflation.
Yeah, it is lower than general inflation. Now, he says that food prices are down. They're not. They're up 3%. And this is what kind of irks me here. I think, and if you watch his talk, you see this elsewhere. He's excited about things, and he wants to get his point across. And I think he engages in way too much hyperbole. Mm-hmm. Saying food prices are. He could have said, food prices are up, but they're less than overall inflation, and we're going to work harder to make it even better still. That would be a correct statement, and still people would be interested in it.
A person dedicated to presenting things truthfully would have said something like, food prices appear to have stabilized.
Yeah.
That's
or
a perfectly
even done
reasonable
better.
thing to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's, I mean, I say this every few weeks, but look, food prices are so inflated now that even if our inflation rate went down to zero, which is not going to happen, even if it did, food prices would not go down.
That's right. Zero inflation doesn't mean they're coming down. Just means they're not going up.
Back. It's not going back to where it once was, right? And I'm still left in a situation where I'm supposed to drink more water here at home because water doesn't cost anything.
Right. Those Coke Zeros are expensive.
Yeah, it really adds up.
The president goes on. Growth is surging. I presume he meant economic growth. Manufacturing is booming. Well, kind of. The economy grew 2% year over year. That is growth. However, last year it grew 3% year over year. So
which
yes,
again,
it's growing, but it's growing slower.
Is
50% slower.
Higher.
Right, or slower growth. Yeah.
Depending which direction you want to look at it. 2% is actually nothing to sneeze at. It's okay.
Yeah, it's all right.
But it's certainly not booming.
Yeah, it's not what I would call booming, and furthermore, it's less than what it was last year. And I think that's the comparison that he's trying to make here.
And let's actually think about this for a second, right? Because words matter. I'm words, your numbers, and words matter. But there's no way to quantify booming. That's an assertion.
Yes. Right.
That's just an assertion. That's not a fact claim.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once you start to unpack it, the assertion doesn't hold up. But it's not like he's saying the economy's growing at a 24% rate.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Now, that would be a booming economy.
Yeah. Well, on that, do you call that equivocation? Is that the right word?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, along the lines of the thing you just described, the manufacturing is booming. This is a yes and a no thing. Manufacturing real output, so this is actual production of goods and services, is up 1%. That's up. That's great. However, there's 78,000 fewer manufacturing jobs versus last year. So on the one hand, we're producing more. And as an economist, I would look at that and say, actually...
Yep, that's good news. That's good news.
That's actually good news. We're producing 1% more using 78,000 fewer workers. We're getting really good at this.
Yeah, we're becoming more efficient would be what you would say.
Yeah. He says the stock market is doing better than it's ever done.
Oh, that's not right.
No,
the stock market is higher than it's ever been.
Yes,
it's
right.
Not, it's not doing better than it's ever done.
Right, and just to drive the point home, the level of the stock market isn't relevant. What's relevant is the percentage change, the growth.
Right, the growth.
And we're up 13% this year, and if it keeps on going the way it has, we'll be up 17% this year, which is quite good, but it's not better than ever. Over the past 25 years, that would make this year the 8th best. There were 7 other years since 2000 that did better than what we're projected to do this year.
Yeah, and look, 8th best is pretty good in a 25-year time span.
It is. It is. There's actually good things to say here, but he's opening himself up for exactly this kind of criticism by overplaying the hand.
He always has to say he's the best at everything. And look, you and I have talked about this before. Presidents get way too much credit when the stock market is high and way too much blame when it's low. Do their policies matter? Yes, they absolutely matter. Do they matter 80%? No, they do not.
Yep. Importantly, workers' wages are rising at the fastest pace in more than 60 years. Now, I don't have data going back 60 years, but I got data going back to 1980. So that's, what is that, 24? That's like almost 50 years. Real wages are up 2.2% this year. Okay. That's good, but it puts us in the top 15% of the past years, not
45 years.
Yeah, in the past 45 years. It's not the fastest in 60 years.
Top 15%. Again, pretty good.
Yes. There were lots of really good things he could say here.
Right. And a lot of really bad years that people remember.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Could say, look, you remember back in, pick whatever year you want, when this happened and that happened.
Mm-hmm. And he didn't even have to go back that far. You can talk about anything from 2020 up until the present, for examples. He says, under President Biden, we had less than $1 trillion of new investment in the United States. In just the 8 months since I took office, we have secured commitments and money already paid for $17 trillion. Think of it. 4 years, less than $1 trillion, 8 months, 4 years, less than $1 trillion, that's Biden. 8 months, much more than $17 trillion is being invested in the United States. And I believe from the context of the sentence that he's talking about foreign investment in the U.S.
Yeah, I got to get a bullshit button for my desk because this is... Come on,
now
man.
he does put the footnote about committed, and committed can be, we agreed to spend this money over the next 10 years.
Or the next 100.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
And, I'm going to point out that there's an obvious news story here. The Koreans, good Korea, not best Korea, but good Korea, opened up a plant in Georgia to make electric cars. But then the Trump administration rounded up all the workers on immigration status, sent their asses back to South Korea.
Yeah.
How much investment do you think South Korea is going to follow through on now?
Yeah.
The correct answer, almost none.
Because
all their people got arrested. Right? I mean, come on.
There's a name for this: foreign portfolio investment. This is foreigners investing in U.S. assets. Foreign portfolio investment is up $1.5 trillion since January.
Not bad.
Not bad at all. That's foreigners, plowing money into the U.S. $1.5 trillion since January. But over the same period last year, it was up $2 trillion.
Yeah. Also not bad. Also maybe
not
a
bad.
little better.
The bad part, 1/3 of it is investment in treasuries.
Mm-hmm.
That is, one third of that money is due to our government having to borrow more and foreigners ponying up the dough.
So you can expect that as long as foreigners are willing to pony up the dough, that investment number will get bigger. And you really shouldn't be bragging about that.
Yeah, that's not, at least that part we shouldn't be bragging about. Words and Numbers is part of the Civil Network. Civil is a streaming platform dedicated to upgrading civilization by exploring better ways for people to organize, innovate, and thrive. At Civil, we believe that societies flourish when their members honor the civic equality of all people and engage with one another through cooperation. Civil seeks great minds from around the world to share bold ideas for fostering healthy, dynamic societies. By creating space for honest disagreement among people who share a commitment to building a better future, Civil offers a refreshing alternative to divisive punditry and insular echo chambers. Words and Numbers is freely available, but those who subscribe to Civil will access exclusive content, including regular live streams and conversations with remarkable people who are working to build a better society. For more information and to subscribe, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com. Use the code Words and Numbers, that's one word, for 50% off an annual subscription. We have implemented the largest tax cuts in American history. All right, a couple of things to say here first. He's referring to the big, what do they call it? The big
beautiful bill.
Big, beautiful bill. What's happening here is in his first term, Congress passed and he signed his tax cut legislation, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act was designed to expire at the end of this year, 2025. So all through Biden's administration, he's living under President Trump's tax cuts. And along comes the Big Beautiful Bill, and the Big Beautiful Bill extends the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So if you're going to parse the words, technically, it wasn't a tax cut. It was a renewal of a tax cut, but that original tax cut was his. It was his.
It was a continuation of the tax rates already in place.
It was, and I think actually that I'm all for lower taxes, but that particular thing, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, one of the big things it did, detractors were saying it was tax cuts for the rich, which it did knock down substantially tax rates on higher income people. But what its detractors never seem to point out is that it doubled the standard deduction from $12,000 to $24,000.
which
was
made
huge,
a lot of people's
huge
lives
news for
tax-free.
poor middle class. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
made their lives tax-free.
Yeah, at the very low end, absolutely.
That tax cut might have been the best thing he did in his first administration, apart from a couple of Supreme Court nominations.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Now, I think, again, in Trump's style, he's employing hyperbole that actually shoots him in the foot. We've implemented the largest tax cut in history. What he should have done here was invoked the spirit of Reagan, another Republican, because Reagan had the largest tax cut in history. Tax cuts under Reagan, the top income tax rate dropped from 70% when Reagan took office to 28% when he left. That was the largest tax cut in history.
Still too high.
Still too high. But he had an opportunity here with a little bit of humility to draw a parallel.
Yeah. And Reagan now is remembered quite fondly.
Yes.
It would be a good thing to compare yourself favorably to Reagan. And you and I, Ant, we were in California, and we got to actually touch the desk upon which he signed.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Where he signed that tax cut. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
I almost cried a little bit.
And the thing about Reagan, people forget, he swept the country.
Oh, yeah.
It was every state, I think, save one in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, he won every state except Minnesota, the home state of Walter Mondale, his opponent, and Washington, D.C., which, Republican candidates don't win.
In this era, when Americans, both left and right, are tired of the divisiveness, to point back and to inherit the mantle of the last president to sweep the nation almost entirely would have been a really smart thing to do.
Yeah, it would have been really smart. But continuing the tax cuts is also a smart thing to do.
Continue is a smart thing. Now he says the tax cuts, because of tax cuts, this makes America once again the best country on earth to do business. Oh, okay. I mean, I included this one despite the fact that's not a numeric thing, but I can throw some numbers out here. If you look up best countries for business, and here I'm going to go to some rankings. Forbes ranks the U.S. number 17. If you go to Heritage Index of Economic Freedom, they rank the U.S. 26. Fraser Institute, and I have immense respect for Fraser Institute's data set, the Economic Freedom of the World, they ranked the U.S. as number 5. Incidentally,
the guy who oversees that data set has agreed to come on as a guest in the near future.
Oh, superb. Superb. Fraser does rank the U.S. number 2 in the world for business-friendly regulation. That's after New Zealand.
And that's hard to believe given the amount of regulation we face.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say, making us once again the best country on earth. I don't know that I would have said that, but I certainly would have said one of the best.
Yeah, that's right. In the world, there's a handful of places that it's easier to do business than everywhere else, and the U.S. is certainly one in that handful.
Yeah, that is correct. And that leads me to some good things that we could say about the U.S. economy that I wish he had said, that are absolutely backed by the data. We have the highest after-tax per capita income in the world is the U.S. Highest after-tax per capita income. The Canadians I have several Canadian friends who are always saying about how, the problem with America is you don't have free healthcare, we have free healthcare.
Yeah, free healthcare, my ass.
Let me explain to you exactly how expensive their free healthcare is. The after-tax average income, U.S. versus Canada, and this is, of course, converting to U.S. dollars. In the U.S., after-tax average per capita income, $67,000. Canada, $32,000.
$34,000 worth of difference. Now,
yeah.
Ant, I'm assuming you're going to tell me how much healthcare costs.
It's not $34,000 a year per person. I can tell you that.
It's not. It's high. It costs a lot, but it doesn't cost nearly that amount.
Right. Yes. We have the highest growth, hands down, the highest growth in disposable after-tax income in the world. Our after-tax income has grown 30% since 2007.
That's huge.
Yeah, outflanking everybody on the planet. I think the next one,
that's huge.
we're at 30%. I think Canada was second at like 24%.
Even that's huge.
Almost the lowest unemployment rate. We're 4.3% right now, and that's after the unemployment rate ticking up for the past year and a half. 4.3% unemployment in the U.S. Canada, 7.1. France, 7.5. Germany, 6.3. Italy, 6%. Spain, 10%. Europe averages around 5%. So we've got higher income. We've got lower unemployment. We've got the highest income growth. All of this is stuff worth talking about, and it's backed by the data. And that's the end of my analysis of his economic claims, just with kind of the sad thought that if he just fact-checked himself a little bit and reined in his speech writers a little bit, he could have had a really good speech here.
I'm pretty sure, Ant, that the speech writers are not to blame. I'm just saying, look, I have known speechwriters in my day, and they tend to be rather sober-minded. They fact-check themselves. They have other people fact-check them. This is a Trump problem. The self-aggrandizement problem has been in evidence from day one, long before he ever even got into politics. So
but notice,
this is part of his personality. And
look at the problem here, that he does this, and so next time when he goes to say something, everybody's just going to, well, everybody, I, for one, am just going to largely ignore what he says, having been conditioned to not believe the numbers, when, in fact, there's really good stuff he could be talking about. Go talk about that.
And he wasn't exactly lying about the things that he talked up.
No, he was in the neighborhood of the truth.
In the ballpark, right? Close enough for jazz, we might say. So, there it is. There's our honest assessment of the recent tumbling of many words out of the Trumpian mouth. I think it's pretty fair.
Do you have a what can we do about this?
Well, when you talk about when you talk about one human being and his propensity to exaggerate, there's not a lot that we collectively can do. Mm-hmm. Now we can demand different behavior by electing different people, but you and I both know that's not exactly right? I mean, you're going to get what you're going to get, and the American people did in fact vote for this. Mm-hmm. So there you go. But I'm willing to hear what you think we can do about it.
Well, now that I say I've got something, maybe I don't. But a thought, how's this? We make a big deal about the problems of coercion. And when we think about coercion, we think about physical force or the threat of physical force. But I argue sometimes coercion can take the form of false information. If I give you information knowing that it's incorrect and knowing that you will react in a certain way, I have reduced your agency. I've achieved the same outcome as if I had imposed physical force. And it's even worse when the falsehoods that you are peddling are partially true, because then they have a veneer of truth.
And I get in trouble for blaming both sides of our political aisle for a lot of our ills. But I think this isn't yet another one of those things that they all do. Mm. And notice I didn't say both sides do. I said they all do.
Yes, right.
Right.
Yeah, all of them.
People in positions of power play fast and loose with the truth to get you to acquiesce to their point of view and their preferred policy outcomes.
But fortunately, this same tool that brings you all the divisiveness of social media also brings you the source data.
Yeah,
a little bit of time and a chair and a keyboard, you can find the facts.
Those of you who follow me on Twitter have seen a trend recently where every day I make it my business to find one person on Twitter who lies endlessly and has gargantuan followers. follower numbers, right? So I say, yep, look, this is what you say to get 600,000 followers, but none of it's true. Well, we don't have 600,000 followers because there aren't
That's what the truth gets you.
and that is what the truth gets you. There aren't enough people who want to be sober-minded and think things through and hear the totality of an argument before rendering a decision.
No, because the feels are so much more fun, James.
So much better. And that old saying is the one I keep using, right? A lie is halfway around the world before the truth gets its pants on. And now with the speed of social media, it's literally halfway around the world before the truth even wakes up.
Right.
So there you go. On that happy note, Ant, I wish you well. And I hope your life is nice and that you continue to seek the truth the way you do. And I would encourage everybody to be kind to each other in these trying times, which, it's always these trying times. They're not that trying right now, but what the hell? Be nice to each other anyway. Just give it a shot. Try and be nice to somebody that you disagree with. See what happens. You never know. Ant does this all the time, and I make fun of him for it, but it's actually kind of impressive. Catch you next time, Ant.
See you next time, James. Words and Numbers is a Civil original podcast. We work with Civil to advance their mission of upgrading civilization by exploring ideas that promote civic equality and cooperation. We believe the most pressing issues humans face, war, poverty, debt, tribalism, arise from coercive institutions that bring out the worst in us. We at Civil look to voluntary solutions to these and other problems. We invite you to explore Civil's new platform at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
I usually ask what the hell these people are still doing here, but I kind of told them to be here this time. So, kind of gave away the farm. But what the hell were we talking about? It was, right. It was about crime and forgiveness and, what the hell should we do? And I know I've told you this story before, but I've never told it to our listeners. At least I don't think I have. If I have, you can always just turn it off. No need to be angry. But the time I was in Iraq, I learned all about new and exciting institutions that we don't have in the West, right? And one of them was kind of in the neighborhood of what Ant was talking about. And for those of you who don't know, I was dean of the American University of Iraq, and that put me in charge of all academic and non-academic discipline. And in a place like Iraq, that's actually a daunting prospect, right? Anyway, one of the things I was responsible for was attendance, and we had a draconian attendance policy that if you missed X number of classes for any reason, you were expelled. And there was no latitude here, right? And this kid comes into my office and he says, Dr. James, they all called me James. Dr. James, I must miss class on Friday. And I called up his attendance records and I said, buddy, you've already missed the max. If you miss another one, I have to expel you. And he says, but I must. And I said, and I wish I hadn't, because I could have just said the rules are the rules and to hell with you. But like an idiot, I thought, well, maybe there's a special circumstance that we'll have to address. And I said, well, what's so important that you can't come to school? And he said, last week I killed a man.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, here we are. Wasn't expecting that at all. And I said, and how exactly did you kill a man? Thinking maybe that was relevant. And he said, I ran over him in my car. I said, oh, so you accidentally killed a man? He said, yes, I didn't mean to do it. It just happened. And I said, all right, well, you got to go to court on Friday? He said, no, it's more complicated than that. The first thing I have to do is go to his parents, his family, and ask for their forgiveness. And if they forgive me, that's the end of it, and I'll be back to school. And I said, what if they don't forgive you? He said they could ask for what's called blood money. And there's a phrase I'd heard 1,000 times and didn't know the etymology, right? I didn't know where that came from. And I said, what the hell is blood money? And he said, well, they could demand I pay an amount to them for the offense of killing their family member. I said, huh? And I said, well, how much could they ask for? And he said, whatever they want. But they have to understand that if it's low, I'll absolutely pay it. If it's high and I don't have that much, there's no way I can pay it. And we'll have to figure out how much I can afford. And I said, well, what if they don't forgive you and they won't accept money? He said, then I have to go to court.
How interesting.
And that flies in the face,
I look at that.
Course.
To me, that looks like a much more civilized system than what we have.
Well, it flies in the face of what I said earlier, right? It doesn't yield the outcome that I would demand, but it does yield the outcome that you would demand, and leaves open the possibility of addressing the problem in other ways if there is no forgiveness.
Right. Then you society gets involved.
Yeah, and you can incentivize financially forgiveness, which is fascinating. Right?
Yeah.
Do you really want to have financial forgiveness? Well, it's better than no forgiveness at all, I guess.
Yeah, and I keep coming back to, if the people who were harmed are okay with it, the rest of us have nothing to say. There's no way any of the rest of us have a higher moral claim to this question than the people who were directly wronged.
And I disagree with that, but I take your point as an important one. Right? I do think we will disagree about this forever. But in a manslaughter case, right, where the death is accidental, I could easily fall into your line of thinking. Right? And remember the things I brought up. They were horrible things that you can't take back. This is a horrible thing that you can't take back that you didn't mean to do. It just happened. And for those sorts of things, those aren't exactly crimes. Right? Mens rea is not there, right? The mind, you didn't have it in your mind or your heart to go do this. You may have acted impulsively or inappropriately, irresponsibly, but you didn't say, today I'm going to go out and run a guy over.
Right.
And that seems to matter. I don't know how far down the line it has to matter, but it does seem to matter. I'll give you one more institution that I learned about when I was there that I think is utterly fascinating. There was no such thing as a car loan. So you had to pay cash for every car you bought. There was no such thing as a mortgage either, but we'll leave that for another day. You could, the long and short of it is you couldn't borrow money, but that's not the important part. You could also not insure your possessions against a loss. So there was no auto insurance. Now, you could see where that's going to be a disaster. Right? That's going to be a disaster. And I saw a car accident the first couple of days I was there, and I was with an Iraqi, and he said, oh, let's watch. This will be interesting to you. And I said, okay. And the two cars, the guys got out, and they approached each other, and I'm thinking, do they fight? Because maybe that's why this will be interesting. But no, that's not why it was going to be interesting. And they did not fight. They just stood there looking at each other, waiting. And then all these other people who saw the accident pulled over, and they created a circle around those two guys. And then, as a group, they all argued about it, came to a conclusion, figured out who was at fault and how much he owed the other guy.
So the people in the circle, they're also taking part in this conversation.
Everybody was in on it.
Wow. That is so cool.
It is cool. I don't know if I would want to live that way, but it sure is interesting. Sure is interesting. And you know, I've got a great FDA drug Iraq story. Maybe I'll tell that one next time, if you remind me. But
you've got so many good Iraq stories.
Well, and that's because it was such a foreign environment, right? They do things there differently than we do things here. And yet, and this is going to sound weird because people don't think of Iraq in this way, it works. It's a perfectly reasonable place. They have reasonable traditions. They're understandable even to an outsider. And they're weird as hell no matter how well you understand them.
Yeah.
I'll give you one more to explain how weird it was. The money changers. Down at the outdoor market, the bazaar, there were money changers. I had no idea how they made any money at all because the exchange rates are set by the government and there's no arbitrage. They are exactly what they are, and nobody ever charges more and nobody ever charges less. How these guys make any money, I don't understand. I think they're all subsidized by the government. But to hell with that. That's not the important part. I'm walking there, and I'm probably in town for a week, and it's 120 degrees outside. I'm at an outdoor market, sweating my ass off because you can't wear shorts, right? So I'm wearing a pair of jeans and shoes, and it's really hot. And I come across the money changer, and he's got like a little card table. Not a card table, like one of those tables you kind of waddle up to your couch to eat dinner on, maybe 3 feet across and 1.5 feet wide. And it's got 2 elastic bands attached underneath that go across the money to hold it in place. And I looked at it, and it had US dollars and Chinese yuan and euros and rubles. It had every currency I could name. And a few that I had never seen before. And knowing what I know, I made it to be about $500,000 sitting on top of a flimsy 3 by 1.5 foot table with elastic bands, keeping it from blowing away in the wind. And I thought, this is interesting. And I stood there and looked at it for a while. And the guy who was at the table, he would turn around and go talk to somebody else for a while, and then he'd come back. And I'm thinking, you turn your back on that kind of money in an open-air market in a third-world country? You're out of your mind. But here's where it gets really good, because then he took, I guess, like a small hotel tablecloth and threw it over the whole table and walked across the street to the tea shop, walked in, and didn't come back for a half an hour. I know he didn't come back for a half an hour because I sat there watching the entire time. Nobody even looked at the table. There was the average middle-class family was living on $300 a month. He had $500,000 on that table.
So what's going on?
Nobody even looked at it. There's no such thing, for the most part, 99%. There's no such thing as street crime.
Really?
Doesn't exist. The social pressure and the social cohesion is so profound that nobody steals anything. And as a matter of fact, I have to tell you one more, because that would apply to Muslims, correct? In a 99.9% Muslim country, the social cohesion comes from that and that alone. So the call to prayer goes off, which means every Muslim leaves the bazaar. Who's left in the bazaar? The only non-Muslims who are there. The very people who are not part of the social group and don't share in the cohesion. And not a single merchant locked the door of his shop.
That's so strange. Why? I mean, I get they're not locking the doors of the shop. Why is nobody taking advantage of this? The theft can't be zero.
No, it can't be. But the shame of stealing to an entire family is so great that nobody does it. And there's a religious prohibition against it, which plays. I mean, there is in the U.S. too. It doesn't stop much of anybody. But even when they know that only the non-Muslims will have access to the shop, they still don't. Most of the shops didn't even have doors. They would put a broom in the door on a diagonal to indicate that you shouldn't go in there. But all you had to do is move a broom.
Yeah.
Right. It didn't take Superman to just clean them all out. And I'm sure that the money changers didn't leave $500,000 out. Right. There's some risks you don't take. But I never saw a locked door. The call to prayer happened. Everybody went to pray. Everybody came back. And then you bought whatever you wanted, and they never thought twice about it. So, Is it a third world country? Yes. Does it have some beautiful customs and traditions? It absolutely does. Are some of the things that happen there much, much better than the things that happen here? Yes, of course. Just as the reverse is true. Mm-hmm. Just as it would be true both ways with almost any other country.
Right.
And it was fascinating living there. It was endlessly fascinating. But that's the story for today. I'm sad that it made your point and not mine, but somehow
story,
life
James.
just works. Somehow life just works this way. I'll catch you next time, man.
See you next time.